Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming along tonight to the long game, Women in Sport today. Before we get into proceedings, I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting today on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and to pay my respects to the elders of any other communities who may be with us today. So thank you all for coming in this, it's not too cold out there yet, is it? Not the 5 or 6 degrees we had the other night. To come along and talk to us about, or listen to us talk about the changing face of women in sport at the moment. It seems like a really dynamic time in many ways, and a lot is happening that perhaps we couldn't even foresee a few years ago. But there's still plenty of work to be done. So I am joined here by the esteemed writers and sporting advocates, let's say, who I will introduce. From left, we have Kate Doak, who is a freelance investigative journalist and documentary producer based in Sydney, often described as a policy wonkette. Did you just make up that word? I think you did.
Actually, no, it is a word that is used quite regularly in Canberra and a few other different places as well. So as much as I'd love to claim it as my own, I sadly can't.
I see, you could have. We probably would never have known. And an old school news hound. As a result of her journalistic endeavours, Kate is also highly regarded within Australian politics as an advocate of both mental health and LGBTI rights. To the right of Kate, we have Tegan Higginbotham, who's a writer, actress and comedian. For the past 4 years, she's been a regular columnist for the Sunday Age Sport, and Tegan's writing credits also include Open Slather, a comedy channel, on the Comedy Channel, Little Lunch, ABC, women.com.au and Fernwood Magazine. She is also the co-host of Sideliners and the Warm Down, an AFLW online program. You would have also seen her on as an actress in Oddball, Holding the Man, It's a Date, Nowhere Boys and the TV series Molly. Tegan's also known for making regular appearances on The Project, Whose Line Is It Anyway?, Have You Been Paying Attention?, Show Me the Movie, Whovians and ABC News Breakfast.
I feel like that was way too long.
That was way too long.
It's like I'm bragging up here.
Tegan didn't write that. And next to me here we have Ellen van Neerven, who's a Mununjali from the Ugambe language group of southeast Queensland on her mother's side. Her first book, Heat and Light, was the recipient of the David Unipen Award, the Dobby Literary Award and the New South Wales Premier's Literary Awards Indigenous Writers Prize. That's a lot of awards. That's very impressive. Heat and Light was also shortlisted for the Stella Prize, the Queensland Literary Award for State Significance and the Readings Prize. Ellen was named as a Sydney Morning Herald Best Young Australian Novelist in 2015, and she had a poetry collection that came out in 2016 called Comfort Food. So would you like to welcome them? The focus of the conversation is this book, Balancing Acts, Women in Sport. Everybody here has been a contributor to it. And this collection looks at the ways women and non-binary people negotiate a traditionally male-dominated space, ranging from sexualisation in surf culture to marginalisation in boxing and the vast power imbalance between athletes and coaches. From my point of view, my love for sport started because I have a twin brother who quite happily used to bowl balls at my head and kicked footies at me when I was leaving the backyard. So I learnt really quickly how to throw and catch and mark and kick really hard back too, and to run, because that's a whole other story. So what I'd like to talk to you guys about is, starting with you, Kate, how did you sort of come to sport, and what was your entree into the sporting space?
Okay, that's actually a very good question to start us off for tonight. I grew up in a rural area in northern New South Wales, so I didn't really have all that much available to me in terms of what sports that I could play, and as a result of that, what sports I did have an opportunity to play, they were normally team sports that involved a lot of the a lot of the bullies and other tormentors that like I was encountering at school. So it was a time where I was basically going, I don't know what sport I can play. I don't know how I can release a lot of the frustration that like I was dealing with. And emotionally, that really took a lot out of me. Like it really stressed me out. It made me go like, how can I express myself? How can I feel as if I'm part of something more than what I had been previously? So my anxiety levels literally started going through the roof, like in my primary school years, followed by a number of assaults and other different things throughout my secondary years. And with that, like, there were two key things that really got me through that particular period, both of which I've referenced in my chapter of the book, All in the Bounce. And with it, they were horse riding, so a mixture of like show jumping and camp drafting, dressage, and all of those different fun things, especially the show jumping. That used to scare the living daylights out of my mum. She'd hide behind a tree all the time whenever I did it at a show or pony club event. And also like self-defense and martial arts and a little bit of kickboxing as well. One of the teachers' aides at the high school that I went to, Inverell High, had a former, actually I shouldn't say former because you're never really a former person whenever you get shortlisted for the Olympics. But like he was a martial arts specialist who was shortlisted for the Olympics in Taekwondo and Kashiki Karate and a few other different things. And he took me under his wing. His name's Nick King, and he knew what it was like to feel different in a small country town. And that really got me through like my high school years, and in many ways probably like stopped me from committing suicide. And that's the key thing with sport. Like it can help you express things in ways that you could never think possible in any other way, shape or form. But it also gets rid of like so much toxicity within you. It's kind of like purging for the soul in some ways.
Yeah, right. We'll come back to that because there's a lot to unpack there, and you do go into some detail in your story. Tegan, what about for you? What was your entree, or what connected you to sport?
Well, for me, it was my dad. And I think that one thing I found really interesting about the emergence of the AFLW was hearing so many women get asked this question: what made you, what got you into football, what inspired you? And it was always my dad or my brother. I was playing kick to kick in the back garden. For me, it was less of we didn't go play kick to kick or anything like that, my dad and I. It was just that if he was watching sport, he had snacks. So if I wanted snacks, he watched sport. So it was just a drive for chips, really. But so that's kind of where that relationship started. And then as I got older, I suppose there wasn't, like a lot of girls who are in my age bracket, we got the choice between netball, maybe t-ball, state finalist. The boys would all go off and play football, but there were those two choices and they didn't really inspire me. So I kind of always just sat back as a fan because it kind of felt like if you didn't want to play netball, there just weren't a lot of options. I discovered boxing when I was older, and I've had a couple of pro rules bouts and they were very fun, and I wish that I'd found that a bit earlier, but until I saw $1 Million Baby, I just hadn't connected that women could do it. It just wasn't, you can't see.
Is that the best reference point for that, though? I'm trying to remember how it
ends.
Oh,
look, it doesn't end well. I've got into a habit with
alert.
films lately of just like stopping 10 minutes before the end.
Good thinking.
Yeah, it's really,
apparently
really
Old
good.
Yeller lives.
Like Gallipoli, everybody goes home. It's really nice.
Yeah.
But yes, it was just that relationship with my dad, and I'm really excited by the fact now that there is going to be a lot more women now who are inspired because their aunties played football, or because their sisters played football, or their mums played football. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah, that's a whole new thing to look forward
Yeah.
to. Ellen, do you want to tell us about your entree to sport?
Yeah, sure. My my household was a multi-sport household, which I think really reflected the Murray Dutch combo. So my nana was a big Brisbane Broncos fan, and my whole kind of family were really into it. So there was the NRL, and then my dad, coming from the Netherlands, was like really into football, soccer, and really, had that huge influence on me, as well as tennis and other sports like cycling. And so sport was always on the TV growing up, just anything. Would just watch absolutely everything. And my parents actually played mixed doubles together for a really, really long time, maybe 20 years, which I just thought was really, really sweet. And we would play, me and my brother would play my mum and dad, in the
Did they
summer
let you
months.
in?
No, I think good on them. No, they were really, really good, and I still haven't asked them, if they, went through some sort of formal training but they just had they just were a really good team. They had no weaknesses in their sort of partnership. And I grew up playing quite a few different sports as well.
In this collection, there are a couple of really standout pieces. I mean, there's apart from the ones obviously up here, but a couple that stood out for me in terms of really kind of making me think differently. One of them was A Coach's Hand, A Woman's Body by Rebecca Slater, which looked at the sexualised relationship between male supervisors and female athletes and made me think about how we always say how important it is for girls and women to have, or girls to have role models in the kind of management side of things, but it was always as you can't be what you can't see. And it made me think really differently about actually that authority kind of dynamic. And Taking to the Field by Kirby Fenwick, when she was inspired seeing the AFLW competition, the inaugural match, and then decided to actually play for herself, which is something I keep toying with, but I think I might have missed my moment there. Yeah. Tegan, you got to read. You wrote the introduction to this book, so I got to read the whole collection. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the patterns or themes that emerged across it?
I think I was, first of all, the fact that all the pieces were so different, that became a pattern in of itself. Just every time you clicked into a different chapter, the voice was just so different, and the different styles. I loved that. But it was just this undercurrent of passion, and in a lot of cases, just this bubbling anger. There was a lot of anger and a lot of passion in there. And I think for many people, there's this belief that women still aren't meant to connect with sport. We still don't. It's not our thing. The men have their sport. The women have, I don't know what we have. I think maybe it's shoes or lipstick. I don't know. But there's still that, sometimes I feel that idea out there, and then you read this, it's like, well, clearly not, because even when we weren't playing the damn sports, it was still bubbling away and affecting us and shaping our relationships with our bodies and our relationships with other women. And it just came through so strongly for me.
Yeah, right. Ellen, in terms of your piece, did you want to read us a little bit from that and then talk a bit about what you explored in your essay?
Meaning making in front of the telly. Winning was a way of presenting. I grew to love my own skin, grew to love Serena and Venus, and more broadly love black athletes and pursue them with passion. In grade 5, faced with the decision to do my school assignment on Dawn Fraser, Rod Laver, Betty Cuthbert, or Dodd Bradman, I chose Wiradjuri's 7-time Grand Slam winner, Yvonne Goolagong-Cawley. Mum helped out. She loved Yvonne when she was growing up, and I can guess why she was important for her. From tennis to basketball to footy, many of my black athlete moments have been shared and treasured with family. Yeah, so very much this piece is about, yeah, like it's sort of a multi-sport piece, but it's like got that focus on tennis, and it's about, you know, it's like a bit of a love letter to all of the black athletes I loved when I was growing up, from you know, black American stars like Venus and Serena to you know, this country's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander sporting heroes, and just sort of the little moments that I had growing up, following these people, you know, Kathy Freeman in 2000 at the Olympics, and all those sort of amazing moments. And I really just love Venus and Serena so much, and I think I really wanted to do something interesting in this piece, in stylistically as well, because I'm like, okay, it's not just about the content, but what can you do when you write about sport that it might be a bit different to writing about something else. And so I wanted to kind of capture the moment and the movement and the intensity of watching a sporting match live. And so very much trying to capture that atmosphere of Serena versus Venus, the Australian Open final, I think, not the previous one, but the one before that. And I was watching in the Philippines on a writing residency, and there was a whole bunch of us in the room and really trying to capture that intensity of like every point.
Yeah, and I'd love to. I mean, I actually, even though I knew the outcome of the Serena Venus game, I remember reading it, and I was like right in there, just wondering if maybe it'll end differently on the page or something. I don't know what I thought would be different. You did that really well. I'm really interested though, because in recent years, Serena Williams has become an icon of mainstream feminism, you know, and for women generally. Quite recently, as someone who's admired her all along, how do you feel about this shift? You know, particularly among white feminists. Do you think it can be trusted?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Serena and Venus have done so much for the game. But they've, you know, been treated so poorly, particularly in those early years. And the sort of language that was used to describe them so, you know, you sort of had that element, but you also had sort of direct racial abuse that was constantly directed towards them. And now, like, I think, you know, Serena was in, you know, Lemonade and, you know, at the royal wedding, and there's this sort of sense that, like Beyonce, like other Black American women that are really in the mainstream, that, you know, their sort of hard work then becomes all women's sort of achievement. We're not really recognising all those intersections, and and the way that sort of the Williams sisters have and other women have championed and like sort of fought against, you know, equal pay and that sort of thing, and then everyone benefits from it, but they don't acknowledge the sort of the structural racism and all of the sort of things that have really made those women really push and fight and be those sort of champions that they are.
The pushing and fighting is a theme in a lot of these stories. Kate, do you want to talk to us a little bit more about your experiences and, you know, how you found your way to trampolining via all of those other sports that you tried and some of the barriers you encountered?
Okay. I dealt with a lot of mental health issues as a result of, like, as I said earlier on, growing up in the New England area of New South Wales, and I think that we've probably seen quite a lot of just how conservative that area can be over the course of the past few days, weeks and months. But that's another topic entirely.
I've missed it. What happened? All right, I'll find out later, okay.
I had to be very closeted for my own safety and well-being while I was growing up. and that can eat away at you, like as a trans person. And it wasn't until like I started doing the martial arts training that like I was able to get a higher level of like stability in my life, and also have a greater sense of connection like with my body. I was able to box a number of different issues that I was facing psychologically away for a number of years as a result. And I think that that's the key thing that got me throughout high school, because like I had instances where like I was crash tackled into a pile of old desks in a classroom, and I fractured both of my wrists. In another instance, I had my head slammed into a bubbler so hard that like my teeth were cracked. Another instance, and this is the one that actually prompted the like going to see like my sensei Nick King to begin with, was that like I had a handful of chemical powders thrown into my face, like when I was in a science lesson. And that was actually from like one of the smartest kids in the school who did that. Well, I'll say academically smart, like probably wasn't the smartest when it came to like engaging with other people, but like it was those sorts of things I was having tough to deal with. And when you're dealing with that, you don't want to go anywhere near like the people who are tormenting you. Like on the sporting field, like you get enough of it, like during school. So I was struggling in that sense, and when I got to university, like I pretty much stepped away from sport because I was able to engage in so many other different ways. Like I was able to engage musically, like at residential hall that I was at. Like I danced in about 2 or 3 different musicals, and loved every second of it. So like different ones like the Hot Mikado, for example, and that let me like explore who I was a lot more. But it also started taking a lot of lids off a lot of boxes. And when I left university, that's when a lot of those boxes really started jumping about like a jack-in-a-box. So it wasn't until like about 3 years ago when I had a full-on mental breakdown due to some of the things that I was doing as a investigative journalist. That like I started getting back into sports. So it was actually 2 of my best friends who said to me like, wow, there's this trampoline class that like one of the people in our building is instructing and all of that. Would you like to come along just for the fun of it? And it was probably one of the smartest things I ever did. Just going like, I need to look after myself for once properly. I need to do something which is fun, is going to exhaust the living daylights out of me, but like is also non-competitive. And I think that was the key thing for me. By taking the competition out of everything with the trampoline fitness classes, I was able to put myself in a completely and utterly different mindset. The fantastic thing about that as well is that that particular trampoline instructor, she's also now one of my closest friends as well. Her name's Lauren Robinson, and she's been my personal trainer for the past 2.5 years. And she's been worth every single cent that like I've paid her, in terms of like not just the physical fitness, but also just getting me into the mindset where I can properly live life. I can take on a challenge and go like, wow, like there's nothing to stop me except for what's in my own mind.
Yeah.
And that's such a beautiful gift.
Yeah, really. We'll come back to that because it really has continued to be a big part of your life, I know. Tegan, your face is one of the few we get to see talking about footy or sport generally in the mainstream media. Until quite recently, you're one of a handful of women. Can you say a handful of people? It's probably not quite right.
I
Not
see
literally.
that,
A few. One of a few. You must have encountered some pretty significant barriers along the way. Can you talk to us a little bit about those?
Look, first of all, just say, is Barnaby Joyce from New England? Is that what it was?
Yes.
There we go. I was like, I've got to figure this out. You see, I knew what he did. I didn't know where he was from. There we go. It's really interesting because there's been that path of mine which was into sport, and I feel like, I'm going to be completely honest, I came in at the right moment, and there were a lot of women before me who were fighting that really difficult fight. And I'll admit, when I had some times that it was just like, I was a fan of football, and it fortunately just rolled into one thing. Not like it was completely easy, but it was at a lucky point for me to start, because it was around the emergence of AFLW. If I had tried this 10 years ago, it just wouldn't have happened. It absolutely wouldn't have. And there were women who were pushing and toiling away for a long time before me. It's interesting in that I probably found more barriers in comedy than I have in sport.
I hear that parallel a lot, actually.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh, let's have another panel. But I really do think that a lot of that has come down to, as I said, the timing. That said, there is still a lot of stuff that's out there that isn't great. It's the way women are spoken about in the media still. There are so many more women represented now, but they're shafted very regularly. Or we were talking about this just backstage. There was an article that I just have to bring up because it shat me to tears. So a team of girls, if this was about a football game that happened over the weekend, the football game had to be stopped because the girls all started fighting. And as you were quick to point out, the paper made sure they mentioned they were slapping each other. The girls were slapping each other. And this was one of the things that the coach said. I mean, you're talking about girls slapping each other. What are we meant to do? I don't know, find them, stop them slapping each other, keep going with the game. But there's a whole article about that they're slapping each other, and it's like, well, they're playing football and they got stuck into each other, and it's not great, but it's all right.
Yeah.
It's
happened before.
It's happened before. And one of the other comparisons was like, we've seen nothing like this in the men's senior games. I'm pretty sure you have, okay? I'm pretty sure you have. I think it's fine. But there are just little things like that we just need to constantly keep on top of, keep making it better, and just put more women on the television talking about sport.
Yeah, that whole notion of that you keep hearing a lot of the traditional male commentators talking about feeling uncomfortable about seeing, women hit each other, or women, their bodies being used for strength and power rather than what I guess they're used to. And this notion of being uncomfortable, it's like, we've been uncomfortable our whole life. Just get over it, dude.
I will say that the first time I saw a couple of female footballers really getting stuck into each other on the field, I was like, oh, well, that is different. Because you're absolutely right. We don't see women being physical in that way. The only time I'd ever seen fighting like that, other than all the boxing stuff, was in there's a film called Flying High, where there's a couple of Girl Scouts who get stuck into like this is the sort of exposure that women actually just being aggressive with each other get. You don't see it.
Yeah.
So it's not only confronting for the male commentators, it is confronting for everyone. We're just getting over it. That's all it is. Just move past it. They're playing football. They're going to hit each other.
Yeah, correct it and move on, just like you do with other bad behaviour. Ellen, what sorts of changes do you see, have you identified, in recent years towards a more inclusive sporting space, if you have indeed seen those?
Yeah, definitely more cis women on TV, like talking about sport, more women officiating sport. Definitely, in terms of representation, that I think in general a lot of sports have come a long way in sort of my lifetime.
In terms of other kinds of diversity, we're not moving quickly enough, are we?
No, absolutely not.
So, and what about for you guys? Is there anything in particular that you sort of identified as being especially significant, or something that maybe hasn't, was a missed opportunity?
That's a great way to put me on the spot, actually.
Sorry. Question without notice.
I think that there's a lot of different areas that we need to focus on in terms of not just diversity, but like inclusion as well in sport. And like a lot of people go, oh, they're actually the same thing. No, they're not. Because you can have like diversity, but like if the people who are engaging like in those particular sporting codes aren't made to feel welcome, aren't made to feel valued, you're quickly going to lose them. They're going to start playing sport, get sick of like being treated inappropriately, and then just put their footy boots up or whatever and just walk away. I think that that's a key thing that like that has really been coming up, like both with what's happened, like with Hannah Mounsey, for example, with the AFL, and also I think a lot of other trans athletes as well, because we're basically told, oh yes, we're inclusive, like a football code or cricket or any other type of ball sport, they're saying like, yeah, we're inclusive. And when you try to like get in and actually do anything with them, they go, oh, well, we say that we're inclusive, but we're going to pigeonhole you into like another particular like area or code or whatever. And you just go like, where's the sincerity? Where's the real heart with it? Like, if you're wanting people to play your sport, if you're wanting to utilise the marketing power and also social power that comes with saying we're diverse and inclusive, we accept people for who they are, you've got to live it. You've got to you've got to put yourself out there and say this is what we stand for. I think that with the with Rugby Australia, with the Israel Folau incident, that has been a key element with it. Like they could have stood up, they could have said like, we disavow Israel Folau for what he said, but they haven't. It's basically fallen to what's his name, Pocock from the ACT in the past few days to finally say, no, this is not acceptable, and do what the what Rugby Australia and the Wallabies like should have done a number of weeks ago, and like for it to be that bad, like for LGBTI athletes, it kind of like really strikes home to me what it would have been like and is still like for athletes of various different like ethnic minorities, for example, like just going back to Serena and Venus Williams, for example. I've admired those two ladies for at least a decade or 15 odd years, as long as I've been on the professional circuit, not just because like they're awesome players, but because they carry themselves in a manner which is so worthy of the game. They put their hearts on their sleeves, they treat people with dignity and respect, and that's something which is sadly lacking in sport in general, I think, nowadays. And if you can have like two women with an African American like background who have had some of the most vilest things said to them, say, we're going to accept people no matter what. What does it say about the rest of us? Why can't we do the same?
Yeah, no kidding. Tegan, in terms of the AFLW, we had an incredible sort of first year that was just a great big party. The second season was a little different, and there were challenges, I feel, that weren't addressed well. What did you how do you see that second year, and did we build on that momentum from the first season?
It was a really tricky second year. Not to constantly bring it back to comedy, but it's like when you have your first night at the comedy festival and everybody's laughing at your jokes because your mum's in the crowd. It's like, yes, I'm a goddamn legend. And then the second night, 12 people rock up and there's a reviewer and he tells you that you're shit. I don't know. It was a really hard second year. Now, I saw that. I felt that was coming. I knew that love, that energy probably wasn't going to drag on into that second year. I mean, that feeling at Icon Park during that first game that Carlton took on Collingwood, it was February the 3rd. Like, it was electricity. It was one of the most moving sporting moments that I've ever been a part of. It was incredible. I didn't believe that was going to sustain that next year. But you're right, there were problems, and there were issues around the fact that suddenly the game wasn't being shown on the 7 main channel anymore. Already, just after 1 year, it was shunted to 7 Mate, which was so frustrating. And there were just issues with, where the grand final was going to be. There were just so many issues. I genuinely believe that that the AFLW's intentions are good. And
The AFLW or the AFL?
The AFL, yeah. I do believe that they wanted to succeed. Because everything else, I mean, at the end of the day, if it becomes a big moneymaker, well, that's great. I mean, it's a business. Of course they want it to succeed. Of course, I think there were problems, though. But, yeah, it's tricky. One of the things I really identified, though, in that second season was this push and pull between allowing the women's football to be different to the men's in some regards, because the fact is it's different. Women play differently, and we have to accept that at this stage the skills are not where the men's game is. To say that they're on the same level is silly, and as soon as that's put out there, you basically, the argument's moot because they're on a very different scale. And that's, of course, because you've got to take everything into context. You've got to accept that there is some of the best players on that field. Bonnie Toogood, she just blew me away this season. Absolutely fantastic player, incredible human being. She started playing, it was months before the season kicked off. Imagine the skill that she would have if, like the men, she could have been playing from when she was a toddler and just played straight through. But because of so many contributing factors, those options weren't there to a lot of the women who are playing that game. That is going to change. We've got to be patient. So in some regards, I'm like, let it just be a different game. Enjoy it for what it is. I genuinely prefer watching women's football. It's been 2 seasons. I'm not trying to be biased. I just like the game better. It's more for me. In the same way that I genuinely prefer watching women's boxing. I like the way they fight. I prefer it. On the other side of that, though, there are issues, and one of the ones that really gets me is women and the pay. I believe that I understand that they're not going to be bringing in the same ratings. They're not going to be dragging in the same crowds. It's early days. We've got to pay these women more. And I know that as a broadcaster during that first season, as somebody who sat on the field for half an hour just being like, hey, there's a game about to start really soon, I got paid more than most of those women to play that game. And that's wrong. That's really wrong. And I think this league, just talking about the women's football in particular, it's really tricky because you are having a few of those players who are getting big and they're getting all of the sponsorship deals, and good on them. They should. But the gap between the players who are getting paid good money and the ones who are not going to be getting by on that money is vast. And this, I don't know whether this is just me, but I think that would cause problems in a team.
Yeah, it does have that potential, I think.
I mean, if it's not already causing problems, the fact that, in a men's football team, even the ones that are on the lowest amount of money, that's still a living wage. It's an incredibly good living wage. It's a living wage that I've not hit yet, you know what I mean? In the women's team, it's the gap is too big, and I just don't know how that's going to foster, good sports teams going forward.
Yeah, and the thing about them having to generate money gets really frustrating when I think the entire AFLW budget, every aspect of it was about $5 million. The AFL gave Gold Coast $25 million last year. Like they prop them up all right. They have no concern.
Yeah.
Women's football is not going to generate enough income, just not straight away, and they have to be prepared to give it a helping hand. But yes, that is a big space that's, still, and they're expanding, so who knows.
Yes.
Ellen, in terms of football, or in terms of some of the sports that have, particularly for Indigenous players or have Indigenous rounds, or, like we just had the Sir Doug Nicol round in the AFL, these movements are important, but it doesn't feel like it's enough. What do you think needs to happen next? Where can we go?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think there is this sort of dominant narrative in Australia that Aboriginal people only play, a handful of sports, where, our kind of, our kind of contribution is very vast. And so I feel like it's almost as if it's sort of this sort of like pigeonholing of like, this is your space. This is the only like little space that we're going to kind of give you to kind of move. And I really feel like that, there's so much into the stories that we sort of tell about sport, about who we are as a country, that really sort of gets, I don't know, it's like the same old record. Like it's really, there's no sort of room for growth, and you sort of see that in the on-field incidences in the AFL, that there is a sense of we're not sort of moving forward as a country.
In terms of what if I gave you a magic wand, Kate, if we could fix one thing, change one thing, quickly, what in order to create real inclusion, what do you think sort of should be at the top of the list?
I think that the key thing that we've got to address is the level of respect that the players in all sports give each other, and also the various different umpires and other officials as well. Because if we can make it so that, like, on the field, like things are a lot less stressful, a lot less in your face and all of that, people are going to feel more like viewing their competitors and also like their teammates and the people who are officiating the games as being human. I think that in a lot of cases, like, we dehumanise each other in sport at different times. Like, while it's a great, like, humanising element, it can be a terribly destructive one as well. So if we can address that, I think that a lot of other issues will start to fall into place. I think that that'll help make a lot of different corporate executives go, right, I'm going to sponsor like a particular women's code of football or sport more than like what we presently are, because I can see the power, the passion, and also like the energy that comes from it. So I think that it all boils down to respect.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to try to encourage, isn't it? But it's not enough of it about, that's for sure. Tegan, you've got, it's not the only thing. Sorry, I'm not going to put you on the spot on that level. But the first thing that you think would really make significant change if you could do it.
It is a very tricky question, because on one hand, I actually think that change, I'm seeing change, and I think it is rolling along. Even in the little things, this is such a stupid, dumb story, but my sister, my younger sister, is dating at the moment. She's on Tinder. And she's like, I really liked this guy, but then I had to unfollow him. And I was like, why? And she's like, because he just said that he doesn't believe in women footballers. So it's like, how can I have a conversation with him? Now, that just warmed my heart so much. But it's just, she lives out in Gippsland. It's changed, and it's already happening. And I just want more. And I want more women on television, more different stories being told in a slight, like, I feel like the female athlete still has to be a particular type of person. She's very kind. She's very bubbly. Like, we're still not at the point yet where we will be comfortable seeing two footy players getting into a fight on the field. Like, I want to be able to see women, all different types of women, all women out there playing sport, just more.
Fair enough. Ellen, did you have anything you thought that would make a difference?
Yeah, just like zero tolerance of racism in sport. And then also really just thinking about how we can, break apart this sport as a hyper-feminine or hyper-masculine space, that there's a very kind of narrow image of a male or a female athlete, that, you know, is really, I think is really problematic. And there's a whole sort of system out there that's really pumping those sort of ideas out there, and you know, it really, changes, you know, who, you know, now that cis female and other sporting stars of all genders are becoming more popular. I think there's the attachment to kind of, let's choose, you know, someone who really represents sort of this very narrow mainstream version of what being a woman is, and let's, like, really pump our money into them, and as, you know, a very kind of heteronormative space, and then, and then that really creates this sort of pay gap and all of these sort of kind of issues around kids growing up and not really seeing themselves like reflected on screen, even though we've apparently made all of this sort of progress. Sport is a space where the body is constantly dissected, and with a range of people that changing up the diversity in who gets to commentate and who gets to dictate, you know, this sort of language around space can really, I think, change things up a bit. Yeah.
We'll go to questions in a minute. I'm just going to close off with one final question. But the Outer Sanctum started when we started a couple of years ago. Our last question, or the question we asked every guest in that first season, was, "How's your relationship with?" Well, we said football, but sport right now. Kate, how is you mentioned a new job that you've got, or a position that you're doing. How's your relationship?
Sport, like my relationship with it, like it's like a dream now. Like just how the personal training, how the trampolining, just being able to clear my mind, like over the course of the past 2.5 years, like that's had such a I've got to say heavenly experience, like, for me. Because, like, you go from depths of despair. You go from, like, being suicidal through to, like, going, like, wow, I can do things. I can have fun. I can go flying through the air, and more often than not, like, come crashing back down onto a trampoline as well. But, like, it's let me re-find and rediscover myself as well, and in so many other different ways. It's let me get back to a state where I can go, well, like, I can apply for a job, and I know that I can keep it because, like, my mental well-being is back to a point where I can take on the world and just keep on running. And that's really come true in the past few weeks as well, because I've just started a job with the University of New South Wales in Sydney as a content and media coordinator. So it's let me do things I could only dream of, like, a couple of years ago when I was literally at my worst. And as a funny side note to that as well, like, I was actually talking with the three of you, like, in the green room earlier on about this. I was able to, just a week and a half ago, go to a function on campus where people were building robots in order to have sumo wrestling battles with them. And, like, I was just going, like, that's so cool. I wouldn't have been able to have done that if not for the fact that, like, my mental health has improved so well because of sport.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Tegan, how's your relationship with sport?
Good, I think. It's good. It's keeping me warm on Sundays when I watch the footy. It's challenging me. It's constantly getting me to go back into my own set of values and question things, which is an excellent thing. Like, what a good relationship it is that it's making you go, well, think harder. It's good, I feel. I'm just a very content, engaged fan at the moment. Yeah.
Excellent. What about you, Ellen?
Yeah, I just thought that when I moved here to NAM about 1.5 years ago, from the engine, I brought my tennis racket, and I haven't used it while I've been here, which is a little bit sad. But I play soccer for the Brunswick Zebras, and we're currently second on the ladder.
Nice. Fantastic. So do we have any questions on the floor? You've got about 8 or 9 minutes left. Is anybody sort of seeing kind of movement, am I? Yes. I'm sorry, there's a microphone coming in. I'm not going to point to you now. That was my instruction.
This question is for Tegan. Just as you're in mainstream media a bit more, there's like a lot more increase in outside voices, but what do you think the mainstream media has to do to kind of get a bit better at promoting women's sport?
Look, I'm seeing, especially this year, specifically around footy, a lot more women, and they're the ex-players. You know, you're seeing Daisy on the telly a lot. You're seeing Katie just in a lot more of those roles. I think they just have to diversify. I know that I felt when I was in that world that it's like there's a different language, there's a different code. I didn't grow up speaking about football the way that the men on the television spoke about football. And honestly, sometimes it felt like there was a different language. And then I'd get together with a group of women and talk about football, and it'd be like, oh, it's not that I don't get the sport, I just talk about it differently. So I think offering just different voices is going to be really, really important. But I feel like some areas are trying to push that. Others, you know, I think there are networks that could be pushing more women out there, radio and television. But yeah, so not only diversifying, but just giving those different voices. It was actually Emma Race that was once, I was chatting with her, and she discussed the different perspective that women have when watching sport. And sometimes I come away from a game and I've just had a completely different experience than the men who I went and saw it with. And I just immediately went, oh, well, my experience was wrong. I wasn't watching the right things. I'm clearly not understanding the sport on the right level. And it was after talking with her, I was like, yeah, it's just different. I just see it differently, and I'm okay with that because that's how I enjoy sport. And yeah. Was that all right? I'm sorry if that didn't answer it.
She's a smart woman, that Emma Race.
She is.
Have we got any other questions? Oh, microphones are pointing.
And I quite hate to say this, but I think the model we've grown up with is very much a male version of sport, the structures and all the, like I guess we were saying it, Tegan, the words around it and things. So I'm wondering if, as women come to sport more, whether that will change the overall model of sport, if you know what I mean. And I was thinking, say, like violence and roughness in AFL has been tempered by, I think, women not wanting their children to be exposed to that. And so, and these things are happening. But in fact, women might develop a whole different model of sport. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Who wants to answer that?
Wow, that's such a great question. I think that sport is still very gendered in general, not just in a way that like we approach things like psychologically and how we talk about it, but also like how we police sport as well. Like when you've got different people like Caster Semenya, for example, who is basically being like told, no, you cannot run in this particular race because you've got too high a level of testosterone. That's gender policing and impacts all women, I think. And I think that that's also reflected in how we view sport at like the grassroots level as well. Like we'll pigeonhole people into particular perspectives that we hold in regards to the world, and as a result, like we'll have situations where people go like, yes, you can play this particular sport because like you're of this particular gender. But at the same time, like we'll also go, no, you can't play this, or you can't play it in a particular way that you want to, because of both how you express yourself and also because of like your physical body characteristics as well. And that sucks. It's something we need to work on.
Yeah.
I think you're right, though, as well, just that kind of is a little bit what I was talking about, in that a lot of our relationship with sport for me and many people I know, it's all linked to men. So I'm not surprised that it's all, I don't know, it's shaped by men in a lot of ways. Like, you even think about the game day experience, it's all very masculine, it's very beers and pies. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with beers and pies, but the only chocolate at Etihad is vegan chocolate, and it's terrible. I'm like, you're not catering for me. I mean, you're just not, you know what I mean? I think that it's all just been under a male gaze for a very long time, and that is going to change. But the language is very like, oh, I'm looking forward to it not all being, an ear massage and blah, blah, blah. Oh, true blue, blah.
I also think that the female sports sportswomen, have modelled themselves on a similar system. So I think, especially in sports that are predominantly male, and so like AFLW players, they sound a lot like the AFLM, as we like to call them,
110%.
Players.
110%.
They sound just like them. They use the same language. They use the same. And I do think once we've had a couple of generations of women and girls where it's pervasive and where they actually get to be part of the conversation and shift that conversation, I think there's every chance that we'll see it move and change, hopefully.
It does pose an interesting question of what sport would be like if it, like a sport was designed completely by women and you know what I mean, from women up only. I wonder how different it would look. Anyway, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, I think sport is very much dominated by this colonial patriarchal system, and yeah, I think what I love is watching. So this is organised and professional sport, but I love experiencing sport through the family unit, and our families are matriarchal and so I really like seeing that, that kind of interaction between mothers, aunties and sisters, and that sort of discussion and of sport and game day and just the sort of like just the role that sports plays in life. And I really feel like I get really kind of disappointed by a lot of sports writing and media, because I feel that it only really touches on 5% of what sport means to people, and how much I feel like there's just so much, so many more broader discussions that can happen.
I think we've got time for maybe one more question.
Hi, I'm wondering if in season 3 of the AFLW, the AFL's not a bit too close to it, and that maybe they should outsource and get a business plan where they would be questioned about the budget they'd allocated, so things like not enough lights would be considered, and things like that, so that it would be interesting to see what it was seen as a business. It's just occurred to me as you've all been talking that maybe it failed as a business and they could have pressured for mainstream channels and things like that. So I'm just wondering what you think about that.
Super interesting. I mean, I am completely biased in one regard, in that I was friends with Nicole Livingston before she took on that role and had just been working with her on Sideliners. So I just think the absolute world of Nick. And I think she does an incredible job. And this I only know from standing on the outside, I don't think she was in the job very long before that second season took off. I'm really curious to see what she can do now with a full year run-up. That's just me, because like I said, completely biased. I just would like to see how she goes in that third year. And I've got very high hopes, but it's a really interesting idea of outsourcing it, because you're right, they are very close, and they weren't seeing what the fans were seeing in some regards, things that were really upsetting the wider community. The AFL just wasn't acknowledging,
I mean, the business model is going to fail because they gave away its product to start with. So, like, who can make money that way, including the broadcast rights? But, it's a really interesting thing. I don't think they set it up that way. I think they thought it was something that would shut us up initially, and now they realise that, maybe we can make money, and we'll see if they catch up. We have to finish there. I'm sorry to do that because there are a few more questions, but we will be signing books up here, apparently. So if you buy the books down the back and come up here, we'll have a signing table, and you can ask us questions then if you want to. But I'd like you to put your hands together for Kate, Tegan, and for Ellen.
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and the world.